The warrior slipped his hand beneath her shirt, resting it on her waist. "Your skin," he whispered. It was early morning when the sun barely kissed the horizon, spilling a pale golden light over the quiet town. The streets were still, except for the distant hum of a few early risers starting their day. Birds chirped softly from the trees, and the faint smell of dew lingered in the air. In one small, modest house at the edge of town, a young man named Armand stirred awake. His room was simple, just a bed, a wooden desk cluttered with books, and a small window that looked out onto the street. The walls were plain, but a few family photographs hung neatly, telling stories of memories long past. Armand rubbed his eyes, still groggy from sleep, but a sense of restlessness lingered in him. He had always been different from other people in town. While most of his peers were content with the routines of everyday life, Armand's mind was restless. He dreamed of adventure, of seeing places beyond the narrow streets and the familiar faces of his small town. He wanted to discover something bigger than himself, even if he didn't yet know exactly what that was. Breakfast was a quiet affair. His mother, a kind woman with gentle eyes and a soft voice, prepared the meal while humming a familiar tune. Armand's father, a man of few words but strong presence, read the newspaper, occasionally glancing at the young man with a mixture of pride and concern. They didn't speak much about dreams or ambitions. Their world was practical, grounded in daily survival. Yet Armand felt the urge to rise above the ordinary calling in his chest, a whisper that he could not ignore. After breakfast, he decided to walk through the town. The morning air was crisp, and the streets were slowly coming to life. Shops were opening, vendors arranged their fresh produce, and the distant laughter of children echoed from the schoolyard. Armand loved walking through the town at this hour. It gave him time to think, to notice the little things that others overlooked, the way the light reflected off the cobblestones, the scent of freshly baked bread from the bakery, the old oak tree that had stood at the town square for as long as anyone could remember. As he walked, he noticed people going about their routines, their faces etched with stories he could only imagine. There was Mrs. Cards, Tariq, the elderly woman who always sat by her shop window knitting, her hands moving with skill that only years of practice could bring. Children ran past, chasing one another, their laughter free and unburdened. Armand wondered what paths these people had walked in their lives. Each face seemed to carry a fragment of a larger story, a history that he felt drawn to explore. By mid-morning, Armand found himself at the edge of town, near the old forest that everyone in town whispered about but few dared to enter. The forest was dense, its trees tall and ancient, their branches forming a canopy that blocked much of the sunlight. Legend said the forest was home to creatures and spirits, but Armand didn't care much for stories. To him, it was a place of mystery and possibility. He had often dreamed of exploring it, imagining hidden paths, secret streams, and unknown wonders waiting to be discovered. Today, he felt a strong pull to step inside, to venture where few had gone. He walked slowly, listening to the sounds of the forest, the rustle of leaves, the distant call of a bird, the snap of a twig under his foot. Every step seemed to take him further from the ordinary world and closer to something extraordinary. He noticed the small details, a cluster of mushrooms growing at the base of a tree, a spider weaving its delicate web, the pattern of sunlight filtering through the leaves. The forest was alive in a way the town never was, and it filled him with a quiet excitement he had never felt before. Hours passed as he wandered deeper, lost in thought and wonder. At one point he came across a small stream, its water crystal clear and cold. He knelt by the edge and dipped his hand in, feeling the chill run through him. The sound of the water was calming, almost hypnotic. He sat there for a while, letting the gentle flow of the stream wash over his thoughts, giving him a sense of clarity he hadn't realized he needed. It was in that moment he understood that life was bigger than the small town, bigger than the routines he had known. The world had more to offer, and he was determined to find it. As he continued walking, Armand stumbled upon a clearing he had never seen before. Sunlight poured down in golden beams, illuminating a field of wildflowers that stretched as far as the eye could see. The sight was breathtaking. He took a deep breath, letting the fragrance of the flowers and the warmth of the sun fill him with a sense of peace and awe. For the first time, he felt a connection to the world around him, as if he were a part of something larger and more meaningful. It was here in that quiet and beautiful clearing that Armand made a decision. He would not remain confined by the limits of his small town. He would seek adventure, knowledge, and experiences that would shape him into someone stronger, wiser, and more courageous. He didn't yet know how he would do it or where the journey would take him, but he felt a certainty in his heart. Life was calling him, and he could no longer ignore it. Even as the afternoon light began to fade, he lingered in the clearing, savoring the moment. He thought of his family, the life he would leave behind, and the challenges that surely awaited him. Yet rather than fear, he felt excitement. For the first time, he understood that true growth came from stepping beyond comfort, embracing uncertainty, and following the path that felt right even if it was unknown. As he finally turned back toward the edge of the forest, the sun was low in the sky, painting everything in shades of orange and pink. He walked with a sense of purpose now, each step firm and confident. He had discovered more than a beautiful clearing. He had discovered a part of himself, the part that longed for more, that refused to settle, and that was ready to face whatever lay ahead. By the time he returned to the town, evening had settled in. Lights glimmered in the windows, and the streets were quieter than in the morning. His parents were preparing dinner, and their faces showed the relief of seeing him return safely. Armand greeted them warmly, but inside, he was already thinking about the future. He had glimpsed what life could be beyond the familiar, and he knew that this was only the beginning. That night, as he lay in bed, Armand replayed the events of the day in his mind. The forest, the stream, the wild flowers. They were more than just places. They were symbols of possibility. He understood that every journey, no matter how small, started with a single step, and tomorrow, he promised himself, he would take another step toward the life he dreamed of. A life full of challenges, discoveries, and experiences that would shape him into the person he was meant to be. Sleep eventually took him, but his mind remained awake with ideas, plans, and hopes. Armand felt a quiet determination settling in his chest, a feeling that he could not ignore. He had touched the edge of something greater than himself, and the pull to explore it was stronger than anything he had ever felt before. And so, the first part of his journey ended not with an arrival, but with a decision. A choice to seek, to explore, and to embrace life in all its unpredictability. The road ahead was unknown, but Armand was ready. He didn't yet know what adventures awaited him, what challenges he would face, or how much he would grow along the way. But he knew one thing with certainty. He would never be the same again. The morning sun streamed through Armand's window, painting golden lines across his room. He woke with a sense of purpose, his heart still echoing the excitement from the day before. The forest, the stream, and the clearing of wild flowers lingered in his mind like vivid dreams that refused to fade. Today he decided he would go further, explore more deeply, and see what other secrets the world around him held. After a quick breakfast, he packed a small bag with essentials, a notebook, some bread, water, and a few personal items he thought might be useful. His parents noticed the change in him. There was a spark in his eyes, a determination they hadn't seen before. His mother, concerned but supportive, reminded him to be careful. His father, silent as always, placed a hand on his shoulder, offering the quiet strength that only a parent can give. Armand nodded, promising to be careful, though inside he knew that caution could only carry him so far. The town was alive with activity again. Vendors shouted out prices, children ran to school, and neighbors exchanged greetings. But Armand felt disconnected from it all. His mind was already on the forest, on the possibilities it held. As he approached the edge of town, he took one last look back at the familiar streets. Everything looked the same, yet he felt different. He had begun to see the world through a new lens, a lens filled with curiosity, courage, and a quiet excitement for what lay ahead. He entered the forest once more, the familiar scent of pine and earth welcoming him like an old friend. Today, he aimed to go deeper than before. Past the stream and the sunlit clearing, the forest seemed denser now, and the sounds around him were sharper. The rustle of leaves, the distant call of birds, the crunch of twigs underfoot. Each sound reminded him that he was part of a living, breathing world that existed beyond the small town he had always known. As he walked, he noticed things he had never paid attention to before. The bark of a tree, rough and weathered, told a story of years standing firm through storms. A fallen log, covered in moss, served as a home to tiny insects and plants. Even the wind seemed to carry messages, whispering through the branches as if encouraging him to go further. Armand felt a deep connection with nature, a sense of belonging that filled him with quiet happiness. Hours passed as he explored, and the forest began to feel both inviting and intimidating. Shadows grew longer, and paths became harder to follow. Yet Armand's determination didn't waver. He reminded himself that adventure often came with challenges, and he was ready to face them. Along the way, he began keeping notes in his small notebook, sketching plans, marking trails, and jotting down observations about the forest. He wanted to remember everything, to understand the world around him as fully as he could. Around midday, he came across a small hill, its slope gentle, but covered in thick underbrush. At the top, he spotted something unusual, a stone structure partially hidden by vines and trees. Curious, he carefully made his way closer. The structure was old, weathered by time, yet it seemed sturdy. It looked like it might have been a small shelter, or perhaps a place for someone to rest long ago. Armand felt a surge of excitement. This was exactly the kind of discovery he had hoped for, a reminder that the world was full of hidden stories, waiting for someone to find them. He examined the structure, running his hands along the cool stone, noticing the marks left by years of weather in nature. He imagined the people who might have been here before him, their lives, their struggles, and their dreams. For a moment, he felt a connection across time, as if the forest itself was sharing a secret with him. He made a note in his notebook, sketching the structure and the surrounding area, determined to remember every detail. While exploring, Armand suddenly heard a faint sound, almost like a whisper carried by the wind. He paused, listening carefully. The forest was usually quiet, but this sound was different, soft, deliberate, and strangely human. Following it cautiously, he discovered a narrow path leading away from the stone structure. The path was overgrown, almost hidden, and it seemed as if it hadn't been used for years. Curiosity surged within him. He knew it was risky, but he also felt that real discoveries required stepping into the unknown. The path led him deeper into the forest, where sunlight barely reached the ground. Trees loomed high, their branches forming a dense canopy that filtered the light into delicate patterns. The air grew cooler, and the sounds of the town faded completely. Armand felt a mix of exhilaration and nervousness. Every step was a reminder that he was venturing far beyond familiar territory, yet the thrill of discovery pushed him onward. After a while, he stumbled upon a small clearing different from the one with the wildflowers. This one was quiet, almost eerie, surrounded by towering trees and thick underbrush. In the center was a large, ancient tree, its trunk wide and gnarled, roots twisting across the ground like the veins of the earth itself. Armand approached it carefully, feeling a strange sense of awe. The tree seemed almost alive, its bark textured like skin, its branches reaching skyward as if in silent prayer. He circled the tree, examining its roots and trunk, noticing carvings etched into the bark. Letters, symbols, and patterns that had been made long ago. They were faded but visible, telling a story that Armand could only guess at. Who had carved them? Why? And what had happened here so long ago? The questions filled him with wonder. He carefully copied the symbols into his notebook, determined to study them later. As the sun began its slow descent toward the horizon, Armand realized that he had been walking and exploring for hours. The forest, once welcoming, now seemed to grow darker and more mysterious. Shadows stretched long and twisted, and the paths he had taken were harder to recognize. For the first time, he felt the weight of being alone in such a vast and unfamiliar place. A small shiver ran through him, not of fear, but of awareness. Adventure, he reminded himself. always came with responsibility. He needed to be careful, observant, and ready for anything. Determined to make his way back, Armand began retracing his steps. The stone structure, the narrow path, and the stream became his guides, familiar landmarks in a world that was otherwise full of uncertainty. Along the way, he spotted small animals, squirrels darting through the trees, birds flitting between branches, and even a deer that paused briefly to watch him before disappearing into the underbrush.
Each encounter reminded him of the forest's beauty and the delicate balance of life within it.
By the time he reached the clearing with the wildflowers again, the sky had turned shades of orange and pink, the sun ready to dip below the horizon. Armand sat for a moment, taking in the view, feeling the warmth of the fading sun on his face. He reflected on the day's adventures, the discoveries, the sketches in his notebook, and the sense of wonder that had filled him. He realized that the forest had given him more than just sights and experiences. It had shown him a part of himself, the part that was curious, brave, and ready to explore the unknown. As he finally walked back toward the edge of the forest, he thought about what awaited him in the days to come. There were still paths he hadn't explored, stories he hadn't uncovered, and lessons he hadn't learned. The forest was vast, and he was only beginning to understand its mysteries. Yet he felt confident that each step he took would bring him closer to knowledge, adventure, and growth. When Armand returned home that evening, his parents noticed the changes in him more clearly than ever. His eyes shone with excitement, his movements were energetic, and there was a new sense of confidence in his voice. He shared parts of his day, carefully choosing what to describe and what to keep as a personal memory. His mother smiled, proud but slightly anxious, while his father nodded silently, acknowledging that the young man before them was no longer the same boy who had left that morning. That night, as Armand lay in bed, he thought about the carvings on the ancient tree, the hidden path, and the sense of discovery that had filled him. He realized that adventure was not just about exploring new places. It was about seeing the world differently, noticing the small details, and embracing the unknown with courage and curiosity. He made a promise to himself. He would continue this journey step by step, learning, growing, and seeking experiences that would shape his life in ways he had never imagined. As sleep finally claimed him, Armand dreamed not of the familiar streets of his town, but of forests, hills, and paths that stretched endlessly before him. The forest had opened a door to a world of possibilities, and he was eager to walk through it. Tomorrow he would rise again with the same determination, ready to explore, to learn, and to embrace the adventures that awaited him. The second part of his journey had ended with more questions than answers, but that was exactly how it should be. Life, he realized, was not about certainty. It was about the courage to move forward, to seek, and to trust in oneself even when the way ahead was unclear. And Armand more than ever felt ready to take that courage into the days to come. The next morning, Armand woke with the same restless energy that had carried him through the past 2 days. The sunlight poured through his window, and he could hear the faint sounds of the town coming to life below. Birds sang from the trees outside, and a soft breeze rustled the leaves. Today, he told himself, he would go even deeper into the forest. Yesterday had been full of discoveries, but he sensed that something greater awaited him, a part of the world that few people had ever seen and even fewer understood. After a quick breakfast, he packed his small bag carefully. In addition to his notebook, water, and bread, he added a rope, a small pocket knife, and a few other items that might help him navigate the unknown. His parents watched silently, their expressions a mixture of pride, worry, and quiet admiration. They had begun to understand that Armand's curiosity was not a fleeting phase but a driving force in his life. His mother reminded him gently to stay safe, while his father offered a brief nod, a silent acknowledgement that the boy they had raised was growing into someone capable and strong. The town faded behind him as he approached the edge of the forest. This time he did not stop at the familiar stream or the clearing with the wildflowers. He followed the narrow path he had discovered yesterday, the one that led deeper into the trees. The forest felt different this morning, quieter, yet somehow more alive. Sunlight filtered through the branches in golden slants, illuminating the undergrowth and highlighting details he had never noticed before. Clusters of mushrooms, delicate ferns, and the intricate patterns of bark on the ancient trees. Armand walked carefully, paying close attention to the sounds around him. The forest was full of life, birds calling to one another, insects buzzing, and the occasional rustle of a small animal moving through the underbrush. Yet there was also a stillness, a sense that he had entered a part of the forest untouched by humans. He felt both awe and respect for the world around him. Each step he took seemed to carry him further away from the ordinary and closer to something extraordinary. After several hours, he came across a small hill overlooking a dense part of the forest. From there, he could see the canopy stretching endlessly, a sea of green broken only by patches of sunlight. The view took his breath away. He realized how vast and intricate the forest truly was, and it filled him with both excitement and humility. He made a quick sketch in his notebook, marking the locations of clearings, streams, and unusual formations he could return to later. This notebook was becoming more than just a collection of sketches. It was a map of discovery, a record of his growing understanding of the forest. While examining the hill, Armand noticed movement in the distance. A figure, small and almost hidden by the trees. At first, he thought it might be an animal, but as he watched more closely, he realized it was a person. The figure seemed young and was moving carefully, as if also exploring or searching for something. Armand's curiosity was piqued. Who could it be? And what was a stranger doing so far from the town? He debated whether to approach, but decided to wait and observe. Sometimes the forest revealed its secrets gradually, and he wanted to understand the situation before acting. The figure stopped near a large oak tree, kneeling to examine something on the ground. Armand crept closer, careful not to make a sound. He could see that the person was sketching the tree and its surroundings, much like he did in his notebook. It was a girl, perhaps a year or two older than him, with long hair tied back and eyes focused intently on her work. Armand felt a sudden thrill of recognition. This was someone who shared his curiosity, someone who understood the joy of exploring and discovering the hidden details of the world recognition door. He stepped forward slowly, and the girl looked up, startled. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Armand smiled gently. "Hello," he said. "I didn't mean to startle you. I'm Armand." The girl hesitated, then returned the smile. "I'm Syra," she said softly. "I didn't expect anyone else to be here." They quickly fell into conversation, discovering that they shared a love for nature, exploration, and the thrill of uncovering hidden places. Syra had been exploring the forest for weeks, sketching plants, trees, and landscapes, much like Armand. They compared notes, shared sketches, and exchanged stories of their past adventures. Armand felt a sense of excitement and relief. He was no longer alone in his journey. Having someone who understood his curiosity made the forest feel even more alive and welcoming. Together, they explored a little further, moving carefully along hidden paths. Syra showed Armand a small waterfall she had discovered, hidden behind thick ferns and vines. The water was crystal clear, cascading gently into a shallow pool. They sat by the water, talking quietly and observing the tiny fish and insects living in the stream. Armand realized that the forest was full of secrets, and sharing them with someone else made the experience richer and more meaningful. As they moved on, Armand noticed that the forest grew denser and more challenging to navigate. The paths became narrower, overgrown with vines and thorny bushes. They had to climb over fallen trees and step carefully around slippery rocks. Yet the challenges only made the adventure more thrilling. They laughed at their small missteps, helped each other over obstacles, and discovered the joy of teamwork in an unfamiliar environment. By late afternoon, they arrived at a large clearing unlike any Armand had seen before. Sunlight poured down, revealing a field of wildflowers with colors more vibrant than in his previous discovery. Butterflies danced through the air, and the scent of flowers was intoxicating. In the center of the clearing was a large rock, flat and smooth, perfect for sitting and observing the surroundings. They sat together, sketching, taking notes, and sharing ideas. Armand felt a sense of wonder and contentment, realizing that the forest was teaching him lessons not just about nature but about life, friendship, and curiosity. While they rested, Armand and Syra shared stories of their lives outside the forest. Armand talked about his small town, his parents, and his dreams of exploring the world beyond. Syra spoke of her own experiences, her love for books, and her fascination with the mysteries of nature. They discovered that, despite growing up in different families and towns, their hearts were aligned in the same way, drawn to adventure, learning, and the beauty of the world. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the clearing, Armand realized it was time to head back. The forest could be dangerous after dark, and they needed to return before nightfall. Together they retraced their steps, following the hidden paths and familiar landmarks. The forest, which had seemed mysterious and intimidating in the morning, now felt like a living guide, gently showing them the way home. When they reached the edge of the forest, just before the town began, Armand felt a mixture of relief and anticipation. He was tired, but exhilarated. The day had been full of discoveries, challenges, and new connections. Most importantly, he had found someone who shared his curiosity, someone who could explore the world with him and share in its wonders. He realized that the forest was no longer just a place of mystery. It was becoming a place of friendship, learning, and growth. Before parting, Syra and Armand promised to meet again the next day. They would continue exploring together, discovering hidden paths, and learning more about the forest and the world around them. Armand felt a sense of excitement he had never experienced before. The journey he had begun alone was now shared, and the possibilities felt endless. That night, as Armand lay in bed, he thought about the day's events. The forest had revealed new mysteries, but it had also given him something even more valuable: connection. He realized that adventures were not just about what he could discover in the world around him, but also about the relationships he could build and the shared experiences that would shape him. The forest had become a teacher, a guide, and a friend. As he drifted into sleep, he dreamed of hidden waterfalls, sunlit clearings, and the laughter of someone who understood him. He knew that the days ahead would bring new challenges, perhaps unexpected obstacles, and even moments of fear or uncertainty. But he also knew that with courage, curiosity, and the support of a friend, he could face whatever lay ahead. Part 3 of Armand's journey had ended with more questions than answers, but it had also revealed the beauty of shared discovery. The forest was no longer just a place of solitude. It had become a world of possibilities, waiting to be explored alongside someone who shared his heart and mind. Armand felt ready for whatever the next day would bring, knowing that the adventure was only beginning, and that the lessons of courage, friendship, and curiosity would continue to guide him forward. The morning air was crisp, and the sun had barely risen when Armand woke, excitement stirring in his chest. Today would be different. He could feel it. The forest was calling him again, but this time, he wasn't just going to explore familiar paths. He was determined to venture farther, to uncover areas that had remained hidden, even to those who had walked the forest for years. He quickly packed his bag, carefully placing his notebook, water, food, rope, and small pocket knife inside. Every item felt essential, not just for survival, but as tools for discovery. He met Syra at the edge of the forest, as they had agreed the night before. She arrived with her own pack and an excited smile, her eyes sparkling with anticipation. "Are you ready?" she asked. Armand nodded. There was a shared understanding between them. They were not just exploring a forest. They were embarking on a journey, one that would test their courage, curiosity, and ability to trust each other. They entered the forest together, moving along paths that were less familiar than those they had traversed before. The trees grew taller and closer together, forming a dense canopy overhead. Sunlight streamed through in narrow shafts, highlighting dust particles floating in the air. Every sound was amplified: the rustle of leaves, the distant call of a bird, the crunch of their footsteps on the forest floor. The deeper they went, the more alive the forest felt, as if it were aware of their presence and quietly observing them. Hours passed as they walked, discovering small wonders along the way. A family of deer grazed quietly in a clearing, unaware of the two explorers. A fallen tree had become a miniature ecosystem, covered in moss and tiny plants, with insects crawling over every surface. Armin and Syra paused often, sketching and taking notes, their notebooks slowly filling with detailed observations. Each discovery deepened their appreciation for the complexity and beauty of the forest. Around midday, they came to a section of the forest that neither of them had seen before. The terrain was rugged with steep slopes and tangled undergrowth. A narrow stream cut through the land, its water tumbling over smooth stones and forming small, sparkling pools. Crossing it required careful steps, and Armin offered Syra his hand to help her over slippery rocks. They laughed when one of them slipped slightly, but neither fell. The teamwork felt natural, as if the forest itself had brought them together to rely on one another. Beyond the stream, they discovered an area of ancient trees, their trunks wide and gnarled, roots twisting and turning like giant serpents across the forest floor. Some of the trees had markings carved long ago, symbols and patterns that neither Armin nor Syra recognized. They studied them carefully, copying the symbols into their notebooks. The carvings sparked their imaginations, and they speculated about the people who might have once walked these paths, leaving traces behind. It was a connection across time, a reminder that every place had a story waiting to be uncovered. As the afternoon wore on, the forest began to feel more challenging. Paths disappeared under thick vegetation, and they had to push through dense bushes and climb over fallen logs. At one point, Armin noticed a narrow ravine cutting through the landscape. Its sides were steep and covered in loose rocks. Crossing it would require caution, but the curiosity to explore the other side was stronger than fear. Using his rope and careful planning, Armin and Syra worked together to descend and climb safely. The challenge strengthened their trust in each other, and the sense of accomplishment was immediate once they stood on the other side. On the far side of the ravine, they found a hidden grove filled with wildflowers, unlike any they had seen before. Colors shifted in the sunlight, creating a tapestry of purples, yellows, and blues. A small waterfall fed a shallow pond in the center, its water clear enough to see tiny fish swimming beneath the surface. Armin and Syra sat by the water, exhausted but exhilarated. They sketched, took notes, and marveled at the untouched beauty around them. The grove felt like a secret the forest had been keeping, and they were honored to witness it. While resting, they noticed a faint trail leading away from the pond. Curiosity once again overcame caution. They followed it carefully, moving deeper into the grove, where the trees grew closer and the light dimmer. Soon they discovered a small, abandoned cabin, hidden behind thick vines and moss. Its roof was partially collapsed, and the wood was weathered by time and weather, but it was unmistakably man-made. Armin felt a thrill run through him. This was a discovery unlike anything they had found before. Who had built it? Why had it been left behind? The questions raced through his mind. They approached the cabin slowly, examining it from all sides. The door creaked loudly as they pushed it open, revealing a dusty interior filled with remnants of the past. Old tools, a worn-out chair, and a table covered in dirt suggested that someone had once lived here, even if only briefly. Armin ran his fingers over the wood, imagining the person who had built the cabin, the life they had lived, and the reasons they had left. Sayri explored alongside him, her notebook filling with sketches and observations. The cabin felt like a time capsule, a story frozen in place, waiting to be understood. As they continued to explore the interior, they discovered a small journal tucked away under a loose floorboard. Its pages were yellowed and fragile, filled with neat handwriting that told the story of a traveler who had once sought refuge in the forest. The journal spoke of adventures, struggles, and the quiet beauty of the forest, echoing many of the feelings Armin and Syra had themselves. They read the entries carefully, taking turns deciphering the faded words. Each passage seemed to draw them closer to the person who had written it, bridging the gap between past and present. Hours passed as they explored the cabin and read the journal. The sky outside began to shift from bright afternoon to the soft hues of evening. The forest grew quieter, shadows stretching longer, and the air cooling. Armin realized that they had been so absorbed in discovery that they had lost track of time. It was time to return. They carefully closed the cabin, leaving it undisturbed, and began the journey back toward the familiar paths they had traveled before. On the way back, the forest seemed to watch them, the trees swaying gently in the evening breeze. Both Armand and Syra were silent for long stretches, reflecting on the day's discoveries. The cabin, the hidden grove, the ancient trees. They had seen wonders few others would ever witness. Yet beyond the beauty, there was also a lesson. Exploration required patience, care, and respect for the places they visited. The forest had given them a gift, and they knew they had to honor it. As they reached the edge of the forest, the town's lights began to twinkle in the distance. The day's adventure had left them tired, but the sense of fulfillment was overwhelming. Armand felt a growing confidence within himself, a recognition that his curiosity and courage were guiding him toward meaningful experiences. Syra, equally exhilarated, shared his sense of wonder, and together they promised to continue exploring the forest, uncovering its secrets one by one. That night, Armand lay in bed, the events of the day replaying in his mind. The forest had revealed more than beauty. It had shown him the value of trust, teamwork, and the thrill of discovery. He realized that every challenge they faced, crossing the ravine, navigating overgrown paths, understanding the abandoned cabin, had strengthened him and deepened his connection to the world around him. He felt a quiet pride, knowing that he was learning not just about the forest, but about himself. Before sleep overtook him, he opened his notebook and reviewed the sketches and notes from the day. The cabin, the hidden grove, the symbols carved into ancient trees, all of it was documented carefully, a record of their shared journey. He smiled, imagining the adventures yet to come. The forest was vast, and he and Syra had only scratched the surface. Tomorrow, he knew, would bring new challenges, discoveries, and lessons, and he felt ready to meet them with courage and curiosity. Part 4 of Armand's journey ended with a sense of accomplishment, wonder, and anticipation. The forest had tested them, revealed hidden stories, and strengthened their bond as explorers. More than that, it had reminded them that adventure was not just about the places one could reach, but about the experiences, the learning, and the growth that came from stepping into the unknown. Armand fell asleep that night feeling a sense of purpose he had never known before, ready to embrace the days ahead, wherever they might lead. The morning air was calm and cool, carrying the faint scent of earth and dew. Armand woke early, his heart buzzing with anticipation. Today would mark the culmination of his journey through the forest, the day where the lessons, discoveries, and experiences of the past days would come together. He packed his bag with care, making sure he had everything he might need: his notebook, sketches from the past days, food, water, and the small rope that had already helped him and Syra navigate tricky paths. This time, he felt a mix of excitement and calm determination. He met Syra at the edge of the forest, and she was already waiting, her own pack slung over her shoulder. Her eyes sparkled with the same energy and curiosity that Armand felt. "Ready for our last day of exploration?" she asked. Armand nodded, a small smile on his face. Together they stepped into the forest, their footsteps light but deliberate. They followed the paths they had explored before, but today their goal was deeper: to reach the heart of the forest, a place they had heard of only in whispers and rumors, an area dense with ancient trees, hidden clearings, and untouched beauty. The forest seemed different this morning. The trees towered higher than ever, their roots twisting like ancient veins through the soil. Sunlight filtered through the thick canopy in golden beams, illuminating patches of moss and ferns that carpeted the forest floor. Every sound, the chirping of birds, the rustle of leaves, the distant gurgle of a stream, seemed sharper and more alive. Armand felt a quiet thrill. The forest was welcoming them, yet testing their awareness. It was as if the trees themselves were watching, judging, and guiding. As they moved deeper, the forest grew more challenging. The paths were narrow and overgrown, the ground uneven and strewn with rocks and fallen branches. They had to step carefully to avoid slipping or losing their footing. At one point they came across a dense thicket, so thick it seemed impossible to pass. Syra examined it closely. "If we move slowly and push the branches aside, we can get through," she suggested. They worked together, carefully creating a narrow path while supporting each other through the thick vegetation. Their teamwork had grown stronger over the past days, and they moved with a sense of confidence and coordination that made even the hardest obstacles seem manageable. Hours passed as they navigated the forest, discovering new wonders along the way. They found a hidden waterfall cascading into a crystal-clear pool, its sound soothing and powerful at the same time. They watched as tiny fish darted beneath the water, and dragonflies hovered above, their wings shimmering in the sunlight. Armin sketched the scene in his notebook, while Syra noted the plants and animals around them. Every discovery felt like a reward, a reminder that the forest was full of secrets, waiting for those willing to observe closely. After resting briefly, they continued onward, moving toward a part of the forest that neither had explored before. The terrain became steeper, with large boulders and narrow ledges. Crossing required careful planning and a strong sense of balance. Armin used his rope to secure himself as he led Sarah across a particularly tricky section. They laughed when a small rock shifted beneath their feet, and the sound of their laughter echoed through the trees, blending with the natural symphony of the forest. It was a moment of joy and relief, a reminder that adventure was not just about challenges, but also about the shared experience and the bonds formed along the way. As the afternoon sun began to lower, they stumbled upon an enormous ancient tree, its trunk wider than any they had seen before, roots sprawling across the ground like giant serpents. The tree seemed alive, its bark textured and knotted, its branches reaching skyward as if touching the clouds. Armin felt a sense of awe. They circled the tree, examining the markings and carvings left by the hands of people long gone. Some symbols were similar to those they had seen in other parts of the forest, but others were entirely new, mysterious in design. They carefully copied them into their notebooks, documenting every detail. The tree felt like the heart of the forest, a place of history, mystery, and wisdom. Sarah and Armand decided to rest beneath the ancient tree. They shared food and water, and for a while, simply sat in silence, taking in the beauty around them. The forest seemed peaceful, yet it was filled with a subtle energy, as if it were alive and aware of their presence. Armin reflected on how much they had learned over the past days. The forest had taught them patience, courage, observation, and teamwork. But it had also given them something deeper, a sense of connection to the world, to history, and to each other. After a brief rest, they explored the area further and discovered a hidden path leading into a small valley. The valley was unlike anything they had seen before, lush, green, and filled with wildflowers and small streams. Birds sang from every branch and butterflies floated lazily through the air. In the center of the valley was a natural rock formation, smooth and flat, perfect for sitting and observing the surroundings. They spent hours there, sketching, taking notes, and simply enjoying the quiet beauty. It was a place untouched by time, a reminder of the world's wonder when left undisturbed. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange, pink, and purple, Armand and Sarah realized it was time to head back. They carefully retraced their steps, following the landmarks they had recorded over the past days. The forest seemed to guide them, the familiar sounds and sights offering reassurance as they moved. Both felt a sense of accomplishment. They had reached the heart of the forest, discovered hidden wonders, and learned lessons they would carry with them for a lifetime. When they finally emerged at the edge of the forest, the town was bathed in the warm glow of evening lights. Their parents were waiting, worry etched on their faces, quickly replaced by relief and pride when they saw the two young explorers return safely. Armand and Sarah shared stories of the day's adventures, carefully recounting their discoveries and the hidden wonders they had seen. Their excitement was contagious, and their parents listened intently, realizing that this journey had transformed their children in ways beyond the ordinary. That night, Armin lay in bed reflecting on everything he had experienced over the past 5 days. He thought about the forests, the streams, the hidden clearings, the ancient trees, and the abandoned cabin. Each day had been a journey of discovery, not just of the world around him, but of himself. He realized that adventure was not about rushing or conquering challenges, but about observation, patience, learning, and respect for the world. The forest had been a teacher, guiding him toward understanding and growth. He also thought about Syra, his companion and friend. Their shared experiences had created a bond rooted in trust, curiosity, and shared discovery. He understood that the journey had been richer because they had faced it together. Alone, the forest would have been beautiful, challenging, and mysterious, but together it had become a place of joy, learning, and connection. The companionship had taught him the value of trust, cooperation, and shared excitement.
Arman opened his notebook one last time, reviewing the sketches, notes, and observations he had made over the journey.
The pages were filled with the story of the forest as he and Syra had discovered it, a record of beauty, challenge, and history. He smiled, realizing that while the journey through the forest had ended, the lessons he had learned would stay with him forever. He knew that he would continue to explore, to observe, and to learn in other areas of life, carrying the same curiosity, courage, and respect that had guided him through the forest. As sleep overtook him, Arman dreamed of forests, streams, and hidden valleys. He dreamed of climbing steep hills, discovering new paths, and sketching the wonders of the world. Most of all, he dreamed of the lessons he had learned. That courage comes from facing the unknown, that curiosity leads to discovery, and that sharing experiences with others makes them richer and more meaningful. We understood that life itself was an adventure, full of mysteries to explore and lessons to learn. The final part of his journey ended not with an ending, but with a beginning, a realization that the world was vast and full of opportunities for growth, discovery, and connection. Arman had explored the forest and discovered hidden wonders, but he had also discovered himself, his courage, his curiosity, and his ability to form meaningful connections with others. The forest had been a teacher, a guide, and a friend, and its lessons would remain with him forever. In the quiet of the night, as the stars began to appear, Arman felt a sense of peace and fulfillment. He knew that the adventure of the forest had transformed him. He was no longer the boy who had walked cautiously along the edges of town. He was an explorer, a learner, and someone ready to face life with courage, curiosity, and an open heart. The journey through the forest had ended, but the journey of life, with all its challenges, mysteries, and discoveries, was only beginning.